What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40K. In this video, we are continuing the lore of the Arks of Omen. We've talked about Book 1, Abaddon, Book 2, Angron, and today we talk about none other than Book 3, Vashtorr. It's been quite an interesting ride when it comes to this lore, because basically, to give you a summary of Book 1 and Book 2, it could be said that Book 1 was just a setup. Abaddon, Vashtorr, they create a bunch of Arks of Omen. They tell you what they're going to set out to do, which is collect the artifacts, which will create a key, which will unlock a great power, and that would also help out Vashtorr in achieving apotheosis and attaining godhood and becoming the 5th Chaos God. Not just that, but Abaddon would have a super weapon which would allow him to finally contest and maybe take over the Golden Throne. So with that being said, we move on to Book 2, Angron, and this is basically Angron using the Arks of Omen gifted to him by Abaddon and Vashtorr, and he goes out to take out a engine of power. This engine essentially is using itself as a mini Astronomicon, so it's like super important to the Imperium, but he does manage to break it and reclaim one of the pieces for the Arks of Omen. And now we move on to Book 3, Vashtorr, which I've been waiting a long time for because Vashtorr is such an interesting character. He's a demigod. We've never seen one of those before in the 40k lore, so let's see what he's up to in this 40k lore. Now before we begin, Vashtorr is kind of thinking to himself that before he begins his siege on the rock, which we knew he was going to go attack the rock, we learned this at the end of Book 2, Angron, he's thinking to himself that at any point in time, the 4 Chaos Gods could get in his way of collecting the artifacts, creating the Silver Key, and becoming a god. Not just that, but he also says that there is another entity coming to get him. That entity is known as the Dreamer, or the Exiled King. So who or what this guy is, we have no idea. Now, my thoughts when I hear the Dreamer is the Lion, because we all know that the Lion is asleep on the rock, and that's where he's going. So obviously if you're asleep, you're dreaming. But why is he known as the Exiled King? So maybe it's not him, maybe it's somebody else. But anyway, GW just dropped another nugget of lore that's going to span more questions and hopefully get answered by the end of these 5 Arks of Omen book. But for now, let's go ahead and continue on with the lore. At this point in time, Vashtorr and a Death Watch squad, who are actually Alpha Legion members, begin to besiege a secret watch station. This spacecraft belongs to the Inquisition, and they have been tasked to spy and keep tabs on none other than the Dark Angels. So we all know that the Dark Angels are very secretive about the way they act, and because of this, the Inquisition has kind of taken notice, and they're just keeping an eye on them to make sure that they're not going rogue, they're not falling to chaos, they're not doing anything that's going to harm the Imperium, which they have good they have a good point to do so, especially since we have the Fallen and the Dark Angels are hunting them and whatnot. So anyway, Vashtorr and the Death Watch squad, which again are actually Alpha Legion members, managed to find the whereabouts of the rock by laying siege to this watch station and summoning an ancient AI. So they ask this AI where the rock currently is, and they find its whereabouts. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, we have Tigurius and his force of Ultramarines who have been fighting against a Chaos Knight warband alongside that of the fallen Dark Angels. Now, just as the forces of Chaos are getting the upper hand, the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels reels from the Immaterium, and the rock is now in real space above the planet. Now, the rock brought half of the entire legion of the Dark Angels chapter to attack the traitorous brethren known as the Fallen below. But just as they're getting ready to make planetfall, another warp portal opens up, and guess who comes out? Vashtorr and his minions, along with a massive Ark of Omen. Iron Warriors, Black Legion, Dark Mechanicus, and a bunch of demonic forces all attack the Dark Angels and the Rock. They then manage to power up these massive warp cannons and fire onto the Rock, disabling the force field around it, and this allows Chaos to invade. a huge battle breaks out on two fronts. The surface war is a brutal one with heavy losses on both sides, but the real fight lays deep within the rock, as Chapter Master Azrael and his veterans protect the tunnels and secret chambers within. Try as they might, the angels get pushed back to the Nameless Gate, the last stronghold guarding the Dark Angel's deepest, darkest secrets. Vashtorr can feel that the fragment of the Silver Key is really close, and he orders for an invigorated offensive, but Azrael holds true. As Vashtorr battles against the Chapter Master, a chill sweeps through the halls, and then the lights begin to flicker, before all are surrounded in darkness. Warp gates then begin spawning, as armored warriors fight against both the Dark Angels and Vashtorr's forces. Who can this be? But before Vashtorr can find out, he is then teleported to the surface of the world, where he comes face to face with none other than Be'lakor. It seems that Be'lakor doesn't want Vashtorr to attain godhood either, and he has sent his forces in as well. An epic clash between demon and demon shakes the rock itself, as Vashtorr siphons power from any nearby piece of machinery and launches it at Be'lakor. Be'lakor hides and moves through the shadow, using the very essence of darkness as a weapon against Vashtorr. As these two forces of chaos fight amongst one another, Azrael and his Dark Angels rally together and begin pushing back both forces who are currently fighting amongst themselves. And then the skies erupt with drop pods, as Tigurius and his Ultramarines have arrived to reinforce them. Knowing his plans have been foiled, Vashtorr angrily retreats as Be'lakor cackles back into the warp. The Space Marines make quick work of the few stragglers of chaos left behind, and the Dark Angels then order the Ultramarines to leave the rock, or they too will open fire on them. Tigurius obliges, knowing all too well not to mess with the Dark Angels and their secrets. Vashtorr then rages out at Abaddon, proclaiming as to why and how could he allow Be'lakor to attack when he's sworn allegiance to him. With 70% of the key fragments in their possession, why would his plans be stopped when they're so close to completion? But then it turns out that this attack was also part of the plan, for some of the Fallen had memories implanted into their brains, and when the interrogator chaplains of the Dark Angels would go and scour their brains for knowledge, they would find out the whereabouts of where they needed to be. So this point in space would then allow the Dark Angels to traverse there. Essentially, if Vashtorr could not get the key fragment, they would bring it to him. And that's where the book ends. With an Imperial victory, but chaos still has hope. And that's what's going to lead us to Book 4, Farsight. So at this point in time, it sucks because I really wanted Vashtorr to be more. We did see a cool epic battle between him and Be'lakor, and that was a pretty awesome piece of lore that came out of nowhere. Like, you think Vashtorr and the Dark Angels are going to fight, maybe the lion wakes up. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but something epic did, and that was Be'lakor, the original demon prince, the one who had all 4 chaos powers poured into him and tricked the gods himself. So that just goes to show you that chaos, they're not very unified. They have plots and they have alliances, but at the end of the day, it's every man for himself. And maybe this means, or it foreshadows, get it, because Abaddon and Be'lakor is all about shadows, but it foreshadows that maybe Abaddon will betray Vashtorr, or Vashtorr will betray Abaddon at the end, and maybe Vashtorr won't achieve apotheosis. Because we recently got rules for Vashtorr, and if he doesn't attain godhood, clearly we've never seen a god be playable on the tabletop. So that leads me to believe that Vashtorr will stay a demigod, won't achieve apotheosis, won't become a god, but he'll still be a player in the game, something akin to Be'lakor, where I'm pretty sure Be'lakor doesn't want godhood, but he still wants to have power and have influence both in real space and in the warp. So it's very interesting to see these two demons go at it, Abaddon kind of orchestrating things from the back, And even though the Dark Angels and the Ultramarines won this one, because of the memories being implanted into the Fallen, they're basically leading the Dark Angels into a trap by alluring them into a certain sector of space where Chaos can take advantage of this. So it's pretty interesting to find out that they're 70% done with all these key fragments and they're almost there. So who knows what Book 4 will bring? We know it involves the Tau Empire, Commander Farsight. Maybe his Dawnblade will play a role in it. There's going to be orcs also involved in this Arks of Omen. And then we have the final book, the mysterious last book that we don't know what will entail. So hopefully in a few short weeks, we'll get more inklings into that lore and then I could bring it to you. But for now, I just want to say thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. As always, if you guys want to support us, Patreon is a way. You can give us a super thanks. And yeah, keep liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let me know what you think of the Arks of Omen lore so far. And if you haven't seen parts 2 or 1, go ahead and check them out. I've got the playlist link for you guys. So yeah, thanks again for watching. As always, it's been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation. I knew I never had that much to lose.